Hey, y'all. This is Reverence for Impulse, and I'm Weena Pauly-Tarr. This podcast is my attempt to more deeply understand and explore impulse through conversations with people that inspire me. We step into connection without any planning or agenda, but with respect for the impulses that brought us here and shape how we are when we're together. I'm so glad you followed your impulse to listen in. Soleil was one of those teachers I was a student to from what feels like another era for me. She led the Phoenix Rising yoga therapy trainings, and I've always revered her perspective on teaching and the way she stands in her knowledge so authentically and maintains such an inviting and interested connection to her students. This pod was the first time we'd been in live connection in something like 15 years. And in it, we talk about teaching body based work as an aging person, mothering movers, how physical contact in our sessions has changed over the last 4 years, Phoenix Rising's impact on our current work, the financial reality of our jobs, and what this experiment of podcasting has been like. In many ways, I feel like Soleil is still my teacher and now also kind of a colleague, which is a shift I've been feeling more and more in my life from both sides. And while it feels necessary, it can still feel a little strange. As a student, it feels like I have to grow up now. And as the teacher, I kind of just want to be friends. So I'm still finding my way inside those dances. And I know it's related to this next chapter in my life. I'm so grateful Soleil agreed to spend time with me here and reconnect after so long. And I'm looking forward to more learning and connection with her. Thank you for doing that and for moving first. That was
Yeah,
nice to
I
watch you.
needed to. It was nice to have eyes on. I don't know why it's such a silent thing, you know, but it's nice to be witnessed,
Hmm.
even across the country.
Yeah,
Yeah,
through a different time.
different time. Yeah, still sort of morning for me.
Hmm. Yeah.
Are you hot over there? Is it a hot day?
Oh my God, it's really intense. This heat wave is pretty intense, and I kind of hate air conditioning, so I fight with it, but you have to have it. And then I don't know. It's sort of a bummer to live in an enclosed space. I don't like that feeling. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
But
yeah.
moving, I wasn't aware of hot or cold. Watching you, I was thinking, one, I've like always loved your hair, and it's like the same hair. And then I was like, that hair is hot, actually. I bet you're hot. And I was like,
I have my rubber band. My hair will go up and come down and go up and come down.
and and just thinking about like my good feelings, like seeing you and watching you, there's like a really nice, trusting feeling. I didn't feel anxious or nervous or what are we going to talk about. There's a way that I've always felt around you that's really accepting, and
Mm.
I can just be how I am, and like you're down, and I don't feel that kind of pressure, and I was really
Yeah,
loving that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think I as I was watching you, both you and I expand beyond sort of the yoga world into, the dance world or contact or whatever. And I thought, there are so many ways that bodies can move that the idea of only doing yoga asana for me is probably I hardly do that at all anymore.
Mm.
And um and somehow even yeah, I appreciate in our work the ability to expand into how bodies move and love them in all the different ways that they do, especially as I get older and
Yeah.
I can't move the way that I used to move. So,
What
yeah.
do you find like? What is it
What?
like meeting that limitation or feeling like you want to do a move and you can't? I mean, I have experience with it as well. I'm not without
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly had, so I'm in my 60s now, but in my 50s was the start of, sorry, my phone's going off and I'm gonna turn that off. In my 50s, around 50, I sort of blew my back out, and that took a couple of years, and then I did fine, and now like I need a new hip, and I'm just waiting to get on Medicare so I can get this new hip, right? Which is a whole new, because they'll pay for it versus a whole lot more money. And I can get there. So in the limitation is, there's a little bit of fear, of course, like, okay, now I have to be careful of this hip, which means the other parts of my body are doing things that could set stuff off. And I'm a little fascinated by this thing we call aging, because there really is no stopping it. There's no, I there was a group of people that I know who were going to do a conference on aging gracefully. And I looked at who was in it. There was no one over like 50 or 52 in it. And I thought
Yeah.
that that has no, aging gracefully or not, aging with grit, is like about all we can do. um and because bodies will change.
Yeah.
And I was like, get get people in there, because now I'm starting to work with people actually in their 60s and 70s and 80s, which I could have done before, but now it's like a whole other understanding of, there's no fixing this,
Right.
like going back to something. We're just moving forward. So a little fascinated, and of course a little nervous.
Sure.
My son was here. He also dances kind of hip hop and old break dance and stuff like that. And he was here this weekend. And I found myself a little embarrassed that I could not move the way that he saw me moving when he was younger. He's like 31 now.
Mm.
And I thought, I don't really care about the rest of the people, but having my son see me older, oof, that was
Ugh.
odd.
Yeah. Ugh,
Not sure
that
how I
feels
feel about that.
it's tender to hear you say that. And even just when I was moving, there's something that's changed in my feet. And my daughter is like a super circus aerialist, but she's also gotten very into dance in this last year. And we've been talking about feet a lot. And, there's a big push towards point and straight legs, which I get because we're
Yes,
talking about line.
right.
And I am the one who's like, point your toes, or even though I hear myself say it, I'm like, Jesus, Weena, you hated
Yeah,
ballet. Who
turn
are you?
out. Come on.
I know. It's funny because my generation was like, fuck ballet, man. Like, this is not what we're going to do. We did it, but
Yeah,
I never felt I fit in. My body was not a ballet body. I didn't
yeah.
feel belonging there. But this generation, my child, is really turning towards it in a way that's real edgy for me. And it's not so much about, maybe it is, there's some desire towards perfection, but it's less about this femininity and beauty. And I think, my friend helped me sort of work through this. It's more this hunger towards structure. Like, she really loves the clear expectation of it. Everything else is so wide open and inclusive, especially like we're in New York City and her school, and there's, winning isn't really a part of her education as much. And, there's a really
Mhm,
gentle, kind, socially aware way that she's been educated. And
mhm.
what's interesting is the structure with ballet is like, this is right and that's wrong. Like, you don't sickle your foot, you do this. And in a
Right.
way, I think it provides for her some sense of feeling held or having that kind of clarity to either fall into or push
Yeah.
against feels good. And
Yeah.
my feet, I was
Yeah.
feeling my feet thinking, I can feel age in my feet. I can feel like that, like I can't point the way I was, or there's like a weird joint sensation. And just today I'm thinking, is this a moment? Or is this like now this is the reality? I don't know. That's what I feel in
Right.
those limitations. Like, is this the new normal or something to work with and move with? I don't know.
Right. That's where to me, the fascination, the curiosity gets to come in. Like, okay, is my mind making something happen or is my body making something happen? And
Mm.
I think, often in our field, I hear this all the time. Oh, trust your body never lies. And it's like, well, that's bullshit.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. But I hear that kind of stuff and I think, oh no, because the interpretation still has to go through the mind of whatever the body is or is not doing. And there are outer forces as well as the inner forces that tell us things about our body. And I think the best we can do is get more curious about, like, my feet. Is that forever? Or is that just now? You know?
And why is that my question? I mean, that I get curious too about like what story am I placing on this? That that's a bad sensation or a wrong sensation or shouldn't be there or
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And is that a new question too, which I think is a part of aging, is kind of a first hint of, oh, is this forever? Which is kind of that, is this just my body doing what it's going to do and there's not much I can do to change that? Or is this a thing I can actually affect change with?
Mm. It makes me think of the serenity prayer a little bit.
Yes, that does sort of shift a bit, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way of seeing it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the serenity to know the difference. Yeah, I think it's I feel like I'm just, embarking on some of these conversations around aging and women and I'm interested in it. I'm super bored by the solve the problem mentality around it. Is pretty boring to
Yes.
me. Yeah. I
Yes.
get it. I understand that. There's a loss there and there's grief around the change that's happening. And I don't want to go back. Like, uh, I don't have
No,
that yearning.
no, no. Which is also kind of a relief.
Hmm.
It's sort of a part of our development. And it's interesting to hear about your daughter. Like, I understand the need for structure too at that age. Like, I didn't find conduct improv and ecstatic dance and freestyle dance until I was kind of in my 30s. And I was like, I'm not doing ballet anymore.
Why am I
Why
doing
would I
this?
do that? What am I doing? And why am I following someone else's choreography? And not only, I mean, to be a good ballerina or to be a good dancer meant you did someone's choreography to the standards and way that they want you to do that. And that was fine growing up. That's what you did. But at some point you go, okay, what does my body do if it's not being told what to do?
Mm, yes. Yes, 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 yes. Yeah. I mean, I will say that there is a transcendent opportunity within someone else's choreography and structure that ignites artistry, like becomes something else, right? So there that
At
is
its
the
best,
thing.
yes.
But it's all under this idea that there's a right way to move your body. And and even the alignment, honestly, Soleil, like I came from a gymnastics background. I did dance my whole life. And it wasn't until I found other ways of moving that I realized, like, why are we all saying that ballet is fundamental? We must learn this alignment first and then move on to other forms. Like, my body knows how to walk and run and jump all on its I didn't learn that from ballet. There's,
Yeah.
like that form is not inherently good. There are
No,
other alignment forms in other cultures and ways people move, and they're
that's
healthy and
right.
fine. And actually, probably, there's a lot more buoyancy in their spines, and they're not getting hip surgery. Like, but I, no,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and I guess like what you're saying, how does your body move? That was like my deep inquiry around authentic movement was especially when you're being witnessed. What happens? How do you move? And why are you moving? What's prompting you to move? A
Yeah.
desire to explain yourself, to prove something, to be interesting, to be beautiful, to be weird. Like
Uh-huh.
what if you, what would happen if you just let impulse decide or bring a proposition forward from your
Yeah.
body and how you move? I think the element of being seen creates such a different vibration, and all these different strategies show up because you're being witnessed.
Yeah. So it makes me think as you were going through all those reasons, it's like, wow, what an interesting way to play with the different parts of us. Who's the one that wants to be seen? Like, what if you went into an authentic movement with the idea of um, showing up as your best, whatever that means, or you
Yeah.
go with this strange topic of, you know, um, hiding, um, or I don't know, whatever, all the things you just sort of mentioned was like, huh, what an interesting way of seeing parts come alive.
Well, there's a way that we've used to prompt something, or like
Yeah,
you do an authentic movement and then something really comes forward. If I'm working with
yeah.
somebody, that will be something, which I imagine is
Mhm.
similar, in your
It
work,
will
which
be.
is like you're
Yeah,
noticing what wants to be seen. So that becomes the focal point of your work. Is that true?
right. Yes, absolutely. Sort of the shadow comes through the body, and, even if it's just like reaching a hand out, it's like, stay, go with that, keep doing that, and then we get to bring touch in, which I think is really an amazing quality as I'm teaching the somatic therapy stuff now. And there's this, and I think touch is a really interesting piece, especially for therapists who are wondering, how do I bring the body in? But also, am I allowed to touch? At what point can I touch? How are the many layers of touch so I can use touch without necessarily supporting a body or assisting a body or, you know, um, so those are fun places to be,
I mean, your
as
work
long
is
as you're
unique
in
in that
person,
say it again.
as long as you get to do it in person,
Oh, yeah.
which of course being online is kind of interesting too. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
mhm.
I was thinking as you said touch, like that was really what shifted my own self-work the most, was when touch came in. And the first time I experienced it was Phoenix Rising. And I remember like my mind being blown. It sort of scrambled how I organized myself. And
Yeah,
it was so profound, and of course led me to you. But it's like I miss it. And there are times now when I'm in person where it does come in, but I can feel, because it's not the focal point of my work.
yeah.
And then maybe because of COVID, I don't know what your experience was with like coming back into contact with folks after that. It must have been really different.
Um, it took a little while. I was like, oh yeah, I used to do this before I went there, or I'd get this prop and I'd forget that prop, and I'm like, "Ugh, what do I sit on now?" So it did take me a little while because I guess it had been probably 2 years before I went back with touch. And we were teaching online, everything went online, which meant we couldn't actually teach touch, or
Hmm.
that was very difficult to do. So we have people that have graduated from Phoenix Rising who never touched a body. That seems very
Wow.
strong. Yeah.
Whoa. Wow. Yeah. No, that was sort of the fundamental anchor for me in that work was how to touch, the quality of touch, receiving touch, like what touch elicits, how to be with it. Yeah. I
Right.
mean, that's, yeah. So when you feel, when your work is one-on-one groups, what's it look
Both.
like? Both.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm doing both. And I would say I'm not strictly Phoenix Rising, of course. I'm actually feel like I'm the essence of Phoenix Rising, even if it's not exactly what it looks like right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like all of us who are out there having done some level of training with Phoenix Rising, we're talking Phoenix Rising yoga therapy. We haven't said the full
I know.
name, but I
The whole
wanted
name.
to. Oh my God.
It's a mouthful.
It is, yeah. Um, but I think those of us who have trained under it use it essentially, as the
Mm-hmm.
essence, I
Mm-hmm.
think, even if it doesn't look like what a session might look like right now, or the method might look right now. Like I feel like for those of us who taught Phoenix Rising, the best we could do is put people out there who are in inquiry about how to best do a somatic based therapy, whether they use touch or not, whether they use movement or stillness, whether they're in person or online. Like the heart of the way we were mentored and
Mm-hmm.
mentored
Mm-hmm.
others, I think is just built into us.
Mm-hmm. It makes me think too of the training of listening. And we did it through touch also, but we did
Yes.
it's so unique to be taught how to listen without agenda, to be taught
Yes.
how to listen without instantly moving towards diagnosis or plan or where the problem is, or I think and I noticed it most in my somatic experiencing training because of that and having worked that way for so long that that quality of listening was inherent. That's just how I moved forward, and it's where I found myself limited as well, because I'm not gonna give you a plan. It's like,
Hmm.
um,
No, why
uh
would I after you just did all of this self agency around your own
yeah,
body?
100, yeah, exactly, and I think that and in touch too, which I almost wanna go back into. I know there's a couple different SE trainings that include touch, and there's a lot at the last year.
Right.
Or a little, I would say. I wouldn't say a lot.
No,
But
it's
not
more like
nearly, yeah,
supportive kind
and
of.
not nearly as in depth as Phoenix Rising Touch. I feel like that was
No.
really such a amazing training
And
for that.
we start with touch. If you think about
Right.
the first level one,
That's right. Yeah.
it's all about touch. And SE doesn't do touch until the end, like you're
Right.
more advanced trained. And so coming at it from those two ways
Mhm.
is what's the base, you know? And I love it too that touch isn't, as you said, it's about listening. So it's not like getting in there and digging there. If we're not doing the touch of manipulation, we're doing the touch of connection and the touch of awareness. And that's a very, how do you teach that as the essence of being in connection? Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. That makes me hungry for that.
Yeah.
It's nice the way you're talking about it too. Yeah, because I think now when I bring in touch, there's almost a little doubt or hesitancy because
Is there?
a little bit. I think unless it's
Mm-hmm.
someone I've been with a long time.
Mm-hmm. But when
Um,
you think of touch, what are you thinking of?
I mean, anything like hand on the head and hand on the, I mean, just hands on head.
Yeah.
Like that's a big one. And it came up because I just last week was in an authentic movement kind of deep dive practice with some colleagues and other dancers. And there are times where there's more than one mover out and their eyes are closed, but they make contact, not in a, we've been, we have people keeping us safe. So when we make contact,
Yeah.
we don't know about it, but it's not startling.
Yeah.
It doesn't make you stop
You
usually.
know you're in that space. Yeah.
Yeah, and so then you feel contact and you can leave it if you don't want it. But what
Mhm.
was a moment there was I felt, oh my God, like again, like we were just describing that the way I'm organizing and where impulse comes in when there's contact with another person is incredibly different. It's totally different. Like two entities have become sort of one in a way. And so you're sharing
Mhm.
impulse. Your impulse
Yeah.
is probably coming from somewhere else or a field or them or it's unknown and that organizes your whole system differently and not only for listening because there are times where you feel a real drive to move towards something or push or pull
Right.
um and it's I don't know something about that I was like this so struck at how little I've done that in the last 4 years. Used to be all that with
Yes.
contact, that's all you're doing, right?
Yes. Yes. But yeah, what would be the difference for you between contact dance, I'm assuming you're talking, and there's the difference between being sort of therapist client too. There's a different relationship and authority system and stuff between offering contact where perhaps your client's not reaching back out and giving you contact, you know.
Mm.
Um, there's a different intentionality to it. Yeah. I mean, I go to 5 rhythm dances here in San Diego, and I don't mind it. Music's awesome.
Mhm.
The flow is good, but there's no contact. Like
As a
you're not,
rule?
yeah,
Oh, interesting.
yeah.
I
I
didn't
mean,
know.
there are
I
a
feel like
couple of,
sometimes there are that does happen, no? It does.
sometimes it
Okay.
happens. They don't sort of promote it, but also the people those of us who do contact improv will do it perhaps in 5 rhythms. So I have a few people I know I can contact with in that setting. And it's not like they separate you or anything like that, but I've heard the language around, you know, choice around that and stuff. I don't mind that because, we're creating safety in a setting for folks. But then I come from a big ecstatic dance, lots of, cuddle, you know, ending up on the floor wound around a whole bunch of people in Seattle. So I'm in San Diego now. And in Seattle, the community was so strong, and we've known each other for so long now.
Mm.
Since 2002, when I first found Phoenix Rising, I also found that community, and there used to be 10 of us, dancing together. And now there's 100 of us dancing together or more. And so the but I miss the contact. um I miss feeling my body in relationship to someone else's body like that. Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
think the culture has changed around not just I guess contact improv, you know what you're going into, but do you feel
Yeah.
with your clients a different level of awareness around boundaries and contact? Like, does it feel different to you?
I don't think it feels different, but I think I've also gotten better at educating my clients and um allowing that education to let them lean into a yes for touch or a no for touch and have kind of more uh, self agency.
Hmm.
I think when I first started Phoenix Rising, and that was back in 2002, I just assumed I was using touch no matter what.
Hmm.
Like we were going to touch and people were there for touch and they knew that. And I'm not sure how well I set the space. But as we know more now and know more about trauma and how to be more trauma informed, probably 10 or 15 years ago, we started really looking at how do we bring touch in? How do we bring in agency for the client to say yes or no, or yes this way, or no in this moment, or, and I think that takes a little more education. And
Mm.
I don't mean like beforehand saying, okay, you can do this and you can do this and blah, blah, blah. It means in the moment, okay, am I going in and supporting that? Or do you want a strap? Or are you going to stand there yourself? Yeah. Um, and um, and then going with what shows up as not the final answer, but the place you get to dive deeper. Okay, you want my hand there? Now show me or tell me,
Mm.
you know, like, okay, now we have this next moment with touch.
How do you how do you work with moments that I've experienced both as a practitioner and a client, the moments that come up where there's a conflicted response, like, yes, oh sure, put your hand there, but you're realizing like their body is not really saying yes, or you hear a strong no, but you realize that's actually not
Yeah,
what they're saying. How do you work with that?
I love those moments because I think that's life. When
Mm,
there's a conflict that happens between what I call polar pairs, the part that says yes and the part that says no. And I do a lot of somatic parts.
mm,
So I know internal family systems is one of the main sort of parts thing. I don't like the labeling. I don't use IFS, but I do think, like you said, you have to be so in the moment with someone to understand that a conflict has arisen between two parts. And that rather than choosing one over the other, can we be in the conflict?
mm,
And what does that look like? Which means we work with the yes and we work with the no. And I find that just a fascinating place to be because I'm going to bet that yes and no is showing up in life.
mhm,
And if we choose one over the other, if we as therapists choose one over the other, then we're missing out on a piece of life for
mhm,
them.
mhm. I love how you're saying that. Oh, yeah, and I think it's funny in authentic movement, there's consent and witnessing, like, so you've sort of allowed, but that conflict comes up even there for folks in a witnessing role of I don't know how to look at this person or I feel uncomfortable looking at them. There's a no in there. And there's also
Mm-hmm.
this like, but I've agreed to do this. And it's an interesting, like you said, a conflict to be with, to stay inside of rather than resolve.
Yeah. Well, in authentic movement, I would think sometimes the person you're working with is not the person who's moving, but the person who's witnessing. Like that's a part in and of itself,
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh yeah.
Notice the dance of witnessing. Do you lean in? Do you lean back?
Mhm.
Where does your mind go?
Mhm.
Um, I have to, like, I was watching you and I thought, isn't it fascinating that you and I don't really use movement that looks like yoga, even though I know that's a base. Like there's no real asana that someone would point to and go, oh, that's a yoga asana. And I was getting in my head about, wow, aren't we fascinating? And then I'm like, oh yeah, come on back, watch.
Yeah. Yeah. I we talk a lot about witnessing as far as like, where are you drawn in? Where are you pulled back? Where do you and none of it's wrong, right? It's just following what kind of
Exactly.
witness are you? And what kind
Yeah,
of witness are you capable of being in this moment?
yeah.
Um, as a way it's it's like a barometer on how you are in this moment in relationship. And
Right.
like what capacity do you have to just to show up for somebody this way, in this way?
Right. And of course, that's not, yes, that's in the moment, but if you're sitting and watching your kids do something, are you present with them? Are you truly watching? Are you off thinking about, well, isn't this interesting?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Hmm.
translate well, which I love.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Well, I was thinking, what is like what is lighting you up lately? Like, what are you super drawn to or excited about?
Yeah. I was with Phoenix Rising for so long, and um, from what 2002 to 2021,
Wow.
and teaching and program director and stuff, and it's it's kind of like the ballet thing we were talking about at the start. It's like, here's this structure that I was teaching within. And there were moments in that structure where I felt like, yeah, this is my work, and I'm really putting people out there in a way, not just with the structure to say, okay, go expand, but it started being a little limiting for me, that structure. It was
Mhm.
like, yeah, but that's not how it actually shows up in session. You're not going to do this and then do this and then do this.
Mhm.
That's very nice as an approach. But what I wanted to do was really expand all of us who were touched by Phoenix Rising as students or clients, to expand the idea of um, really having agency in how we put the work out there. And for that, I needed to leave.
Mhm.
So what's lighting me up now is to see where I went with that, and since then, and I've started teaching what I call the somatic session, um, and kind of helping um, therapists learn how to bring the body into their therapy, not teaching a method, but allowing them to look at the methods that they use, the
Mm.
approaches, even if it's like CBT or whatever, to say, well, the body's still here. So how can you use the
Mm.
body in CBT?
Mhm.
If you had a mindset that said, we are looking at the body here, not just the brain to change, then how do you even cognitively include more of the body?
Mhm.
How do you go bottom up as well as top down, which is, you know. And on the flip side, for yoga therapists, I have a somatic session training coming up that's more for yoga therapists or people who go bottom up. The question is then, how do you include embodied dialogue, which can get
Mm.
really heady,
Right.
to make your work more somatic, more engaged, kind of psychologically, beyond the structure of yoga as a physical structure.
Mm.
So I'm working both ends,
Mm.
and I'm loving that. So
Mhm.
I just, um, I, yeah, that's kind
Are
of
the
where I went.
are the groups separate? Like,
No,
you
actually,
I was gonna say it seems like it would be interesting to have them together.
they are together, because even when I am talking about embodied dialogue, which is what a therapist uses, like very Rogerian based, active listening,
Mhm.
being present with unconditional positive regard, all Carl Rogers, sort of work. um, how do you use dialogue in a way that doesn't turn into a narrative story? So there's a difference between, okay, show me more versus tell me more. Tell me more about that. Well,
Mhm.
now we're in story versus, you can even say that differently. Tell me more, like show it in your body.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So there's vocal prosody that changes. There's the engagement of doing that through the body rather than through the mind. But
Mhm.
at the same time, yoga therapists or yoga teachers or body workers, imagine someone on your table starting to emote, while you're giving a massage. Can you just, how do you hold the space without saying, here's a tissue, clean that up, finish that off, that's not what I'm doing here, sort of thing? It's like, could you learn just enough to allow what's happening in the body to sort of carry into completion, which might include activating a bit of the mind
Mm.
with that. Yeah, a
Mhm.
bit of the story
Mhm.
without going into story. Oh, I'm thinking about my mom and,
Mhm.
blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah. And it's like, oh, I can feel my mom.
Mhm.
That's a very different place of being present with the story versus the let me talk about it from a out there sort of place. So I do have, like, right now I have a 6-month program. It just meets once a month. But I have yoga therapists and I have regular talk therapists, and it's really nice because they each have bring in something
Mhm.
to the conversation. The next one I'm running is a 4-week program out of, do you know Judy in London, Yoga United?
Mm-mm.
Judy Sampath. She's a Phoenix Rising person. So she has a yoga therapy accredited program through IOIT. So I'm bringing in and talking about, okay, let's look at what you think yoga therapy is, and could you expand it to be more somatic
Mm.
based
Mhm.
so that it's a little, um, it stays in the scope of practice, but expands the scope of practice
Mhm.
for
It's
folks.
so refreshing to hear, and this is something I talk about all the time, but it's refreshing for me to hear how talking can lead can be a way out. Talking can be a way to get away from feeling. And even when, and I'm very good at that. So if there's a it's a strategy that I've learned that I see in others, but when a feeling is really big, the way I've learned to titrate it for myself or organize my system so I stay regulated is to talk about it, talk it through, and even somatically. Like I feel it
Absolutely.
here and blah blah blah, blah, like all the language. It's because it's like my capacity to stay with the bigness of the feeling is less in that moment, and I need to find a way to balance it out or to stay together, quote unquote. Um, but I think part of what was so fascinating to me around Phoenix Rising originally was that it wasn't like talk was optional. There was a like what's happening now and but I felt because of who I was with, Susan Brahm. I don't know if you remember her. She
I
was
know the
like,
name.
oh my
Yeah,
God,
yeah,
she still is like an angel. But I remember I felt so much option around answering the question. And I remember
right,
teaching it that way too. Like, I'm going to ask you this, but you don't have to respond. And
right.
it was so liberating to actually let go of relationship and let go of that kind of contact in order to really be aware of what was happening internally and how I was being with myself.
Yeah,
That sort of growth was super important in terms of me becoming aware of my own strategies and ways and limitations and capacities. And then it shifted to a place, and maybe this is sort of where I felt um like I needed to step away from Phoenix Rising was when that became okay, I have a good language, internal language. I understand what's happening, and surely that will never stop developing and evolving. But also I need to um get curious about how I'm showing up in this relationship because I'm good. That was sort of
mhm.
my mentality, like, I got it. I'm good, which is not true. But like, of course, that's where I was like, and
But the test is how are you in relationship with that group?
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Right. And how am I in relationship to someone else if there's this sort of perpetual self-reliance and self-regulation and self-inquiry and self. There's a limited ability one to hold that same mm, that might not be true. Be inside the witnessing of that uh
Mhm.
relationship. My relationship to myself being seen, not just
Yes.
what I wanted to be seen, but actually the big feeling place to be seen, the need to be seen, all of those other parts that I had learned strategies around navigating. Now the task was like, oh, right. But I'm like, I have a really hard time in doing that within the scope of relationship. And that's sort of, I think, what led me, the somatic experiencing brought in that layer of being witnessed inside those big feelings in a way, or navigating a more core impulse around strategy rather than the story. And then
Mhm.
authentic movement brought in like somebody really seeing you, not
Mhm.
doing a thing or even organizing a session around trauma. Like it wasn't it wasn't even that.
Yeah.
You're really
Yeah.
just being seen. And that felt like another place of inquiry. So there I feel this spiral now towards who I am with others or who I am in relationship to the world is more of a focal point than maybe who I am with myself. And maybe that comes from parenting and marriage and I don't know.
All
Um
of it, of course it does.
yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. You can't sort of separate that.
Mhm.
But what I love about all the places that you've gone is the authenticity of what drove you towards those kind of modalities or methods or um, presencing needed, and then the way that you bring that out into the world.
Mm.
And so for me, I feel like, ooh, Phoenix Rising did its job in a
Mm.
sense, like we supported you in going out into the world and saying, what's next, or what's now, or let me try something totally different. And then kind of bringing it all back together. And I know you're doing it personally. I know we all have to do it personally, but I also know you're offering it now out into the world to the people you touch. And it's like, you know, for anyone who teaches, it's like, what better thing can we put out in the world right now but people who are authentically um, being within their own um, agency of what feels right or wise for you.
Mm. That's really nice to hear, Soleil. Yeah.
You're doing good work.
Oh, I mean, I think, I'm still in touch with Barry. I just saw him last year.
Ah,
And
that's
we
so
talk,
sweet.
my mentor of like, what are we on? 20 years or something. It's like,
I
yeah.
still talk to my mentor who is Achelan.
Oh
And so
my gosh.
Achelan and
Yeah.
Barry,
Yeah.
it's the whole
Yeah.
thing. He just came back from Italy. So
Oh,
so I got all the pictures from that.
oh,
And
sweet. Yeah.
I know, isn't that wonderful? I don't
Yeah.
have any other I mean, all my people are in some way associated with Phoenix Rising,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
my heart people.
Yeah. I feel
Yeah.
like that. Yeah. I would say it was, when you think of your development as a kid, what is it? 1 through 5 or whatever these like that laid the groundwork. I feel like Phoenix
Hmm.
Rising was that period for me because it is so essential. And I've actually started I just did an in-person session and I started with the centering. Like
Ah,
there's things that I bring back that are so solid. And
yes.
part of it is also that time, I don't know. It feels magical in that how it all got organized, but also who was offering the work and how it was being offered. It was fearless
Hmm.
and had so much integrity around the why and what it
Yeah.
was. Like I just yeah.
I remember being in like my first level one with Karen teaching,
Mm.
and that first touch, like you stand, you put a hand at the heart and one at the back of the heart, and I'm standing partnered with this very tall man, and I'm short, so my arms are way up here, you know, and you go in, and it was so intentional. You move slowly, the fingertips on front, the hand on back. He starts crying, and I'm like, oh shit, what do I do with this? And I'm like looking at Karen, she's like, just stay, just stay, and I'm like, okay, just stay, be present. I didn't know anything about anything. This was my first training in the, I was a computer geek. I worked at Microsoft
Right.
and Adobe, and getting him, what the hell did I know about touching a heart,
Oh, yeah.
and I remember sitting afterwards with this man, and he said, I had open heart surgery like 6 months ago. It's the first time someone has touched me without poking or prodding or needing information that I have no idea how to give. And I was like, okay, I'm sold. I don't know
Mhm.
what this is, but
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep doing it.
Mm. I mean, there's something too about the space it held between that kind of mystery and then and also owned owned its place in terms of not needing to create value outside of that. Like that was the value. Like you're and being trained immediately to recognize how you showed up in that moment. Like what is your ability to be with what's here,
Right,
rather
right,
than like head towards a sort of expertise place of I mean, the humility in saying, I don't know what's happening here, but I trust it is
right,
really
right.
not many things are taught that way. Not many things
Now,
are taught
for
to
the
sort of like,
very
yeah.
first experience to have Karen go, just stay. Like, you're doing just fine, just stay. And it's like probably one of my biggest learnings, and that was day one. That was,
I mean, Karen modeled to me something I've aspired to for my whole life, and it was that, like
yeah,
her ability to be there. Ooh,
I know.
yeah. She was amazing.
Yeah, yeah. She still shows up when I'm teaching, kind of
Mhm.
laughing, like, really? You said that?
Her laugh, her little kid laugh.
Uh-huh.
She was amazing. Yeah. Um,
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever felt so close to whatever an embodied saint, God, whatever person is than her. And yeah, her passing really affected me in a big way. Like surprise, I know it did for so many people, but it was very surprising and devastating, really. Like I
yes.
felt like I had just begun, you know, learning from her and I had decades to go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And she was beer drinking and potato chip eating,
Oh
and
yeah.
I loved all that,
Me
and
too.
just
Yeah.
real.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I remember Elisa said, somebody was like, so how do you, come back to yourself between sessions and like find composure? And she's like, oh, Facebook. I was like, oh my God, I love her so much. Like,
I know, you're like, oh no.
yeah.
No, she had like bad movies, and
Uh-huh. Yeah.
she, yeah,
Yeah.
turned off. So, which is
Yeah.
funny because I think about that now. So I was telling you, I think before the recording went on, that the latest greatest thing that I'm doing for my body. And I have to say, the hip thing that I'm going through, I remember her going through hip
Oh,
stuff
yeah. Yeah.
and teaching with it, having to use like one of the
All those
rods to
props.
point and
Yeah.
stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And now I kind of feel like, wow, did I like take Karen on in a way? Like I feel like I look like Karen, trying to get up off the
But
floor.
are you still
Uh,
working on the floor?
oh yeah.
Wow.
Hmm.
Amazing.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So, but I have a whole lot more props and other things that sort of help with that.
Yeah.
I'm just, we'll have to see. I'm just getting to the point where it's like, I bent over someone to do a little pressure, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to do that. I'm just
Mm.
going to do one hand.
I just did it. You just reminded me last night I did a little with my daughter where you wrap their legs around and lift their hips, rocking.
Yeah.
And then I set her down and then I pushed on her pelvis. She's 9, so it's like, it's this little body. And she said, "Why does that feel good?" I was like, "I don't know. Do we need to
Yeah.
answer it?" Like,
Yeah. Could
um,
you answer it? I
yeah.
remember doing that with Jake too. Yeah. At one point, actually, I remember moving his leg. I think I did a legs to sides with him, and he started crying. And I'm like, yeah, that happens sometimes,
Oh,
And as mom, I'm like, shit, I don't know what that was, but I had to sort of just go, okay.
yeah.
you know,
Huh. Yeah.
he's not very inquisitive about that kind of stuff, but he remembered it.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
talk
My
about it.
son, I've done little he's very sensorially has sort of an acute sensory perception and then balances it by total shutdown. So it's like both,
Yes, yes.
which feels very
And
male to me actually.
very male.
Mm.
Actually, interesting you say that because my husband, who's a therapist, is who I wasn't married when I knew you. So, but I've talked with him about that. He's like, yes, you can work really intimately with a man, but then they need to just turn around and walk away,
Yeah.
And he tells me in relationship to what he's doing, we can be really intimate. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to go watch TV.
Yeah.
And now I understand it. It seems to me it was a little strange, but I can see that with my son. And like
Mhm.
you're saying, it is a very masculine kind of
Energy or
formula.
quality or yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sort of still navigating that. He's 13. How old is Jake? He's
31.
30s. Yeah, 31. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, oh my gosh. But what he did get me into um, about a month ago was virtual reality goggles.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been trying to find some kind of cardio that I can do with my body, with my hip. That doesn't like I can't really walk very far or fast enough now. I
Mhm.
running, I can't do yoga in the way there's no bending in of the knee or anything like that. So I've been very like confused. Biking, if I had a place to swim, maybe I would, but that takes a lot.
I know.
Um, I just was not finding a way. And he's like, here, try this virtual reality game. It was so much fun. Like I can do an hour of sweating and they set you up so you decide how far you can bend and
Okay.
it'll kind of gear you towards okay, you can only bend this far but not that far. So the things that tell you to bend, are limited,
Mhm.
rather than really wide.
Mhm.
And and it's total hand-eye coordination and I'm going and moving. I'm like lasering through stuff and it's great music
Uh-huh.
and I'm doing all my symphonies like I'm a huge conductor and
Oh,
it's
fun.
just I'm having so much fun and really in these beautiful places they take you and
Yeah.
stuff. I i'm embarrassed to say and not embarrassed that it is a lot of fun and um I'm curious about it, I
Mhm.
guess. And
Yeah.
my hip feels better. I feel
Mm.
stronger.
Mhm.
I can bend more, which seems weird because I'm not really bending in it. I'm more
Mm.
like step,
Mhm.
step together, sort of thing. That's about
I
all I
love
can
it.
do.
I did the lit we have because my husband's in tech, so he'll bring home things that he has to sort of live with and try for a while, and one of them was a VR headset, and I mean, I'm fascinated, completely fascinated in what is happening because when you watch someone do it, they're fully invested, right? They're
Yes.
almost in 100% in
Yes.
there, which is why Zoom works because there's buy-in. Our body has buy-in. I'm really with Soleil. And then I'm like, oh, wait, she's on a screen. But it's like reading a
Yeah.
book.
But you
I'm looking
right,
at letters on a page and then I'm in a world. And to
right.
me, virtual reality is the same thing. But what's fascinating is there are very few things that you enter in like that full with your whole body so engaged in the process. Like I'm
Yeah.
sitting and I'm with you and I'm animated. I can feel my legs, but if we were in the same room, I might be moving differently. And in VR, your whole body's involved and completely disconnected. It's like it's both. Like you watch someone
Yes.
doing it and you're like, this is so funny because I've never seen you move like that. It's like they take on a different motor
Persona
system.
or yes, yes.
And yeah,
Very true. Right. It's
I thought it
funny
would
you
be
say
so
that.
funny to like
Yeah.
choreograph, like if you choreographed a piece, could you get everyone? if you were doing synchronized movement, let's say if like 8 people had on VR headsets, would they be able to get their bodies together even though they weren't aware of the other person? Like, and what would that I speaking of sort of a bifurcated experience or conflict, I think it would be so funny or interesting to see what would happen. And then
Yes,
can sometimes with VR you can see what they see. Like there'll be a screen, for
right.
example, where you can
You can.
see.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. It is funny. But their bodies become other, something very different.
Yes, I agree because you're in relationship to whatever is on the screen rather than what is
Mm,
around you. And especially if you can't really see what's on the screen, all you
mhm,
see is, you know.
mhm. Yeah.
It's I would love to see, yeah, some kind of choreographed something or other with
I bet
that.
it's out
And
there. Yeah.
I'm very curious, one of the things that we have going for ourselves. I mean, I do probably 70% of sessions in person and both group and individual and about 30% online. Maybe it's 60/40. I don't know. But
Mhm.
both group and individual both work great.
Yeah.
Um, I I teach both online and in person as well. Like tomorrow, I'm going in person. I'm like, oh, it's been a little while since I've actually taught a workshop to
Mm,
therapists in person, you
mhm.
know? So I'm realizing with excitement that I'm pulling out like actual newsprint and I get to hand draw rather than use like a slideshow or something,
Yeah.
you know,
Wow.
like that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
your skills kind of expand, but I am curious because one of the things we have going for ourselves as somatic therapists, if you're in person, is actually using touch. So, what happens when these VR glasses get better, more sophisticated? You can be with someone in the room together. So you can, because right now you can't see a full body. So
Right.
I have to really ask clients either to move back or somehow set up so I can see more of the body because
Mhm.
I have no idea if you're tapping your foot right now, right?
Mhm.
So when you're in virtual reality and you can see a whole body, what does touch feel like at that point?
Mhm.
How do you connect? Like it's just going to be new skills. It's
Mhm.
just new skills.
It'll be new. And it is similar to what you're saying in terms of the aging process or like we're moving forward, you can't go back. Like I feel that's true with technology. I don't think we
Yeah.
can go back. Like this is just we're moving in this direction
Yeah.
and I think, there will be substitutions for contact like haptics. I was reading something so interesting about these haptic suits that blind folks are wearing to live concerts that
Really?
respond to the sound so that they can feel the sound in their bodies, which was
Oh,
so exciting to me. And that
wow.
there's a contact with sound through touch basically and different intensities and different locations on the body. And I can imagine something like that. But that's also still even haptics don't are not good enough to replicate human contact, which is different and holds like, infinite variation.
Right.
So,
Right. But we're
um,
at the start of something.
start,
I
yeah.
have what, 10 more years of doing my work properly. So by that time, it will be very different, but I probably won't be within those people who learn
Mhm,
some of those new techniques.
mhm, mm,
That's also, and I'm an old geek, right? So I worked within the computer
yeah,
field for 20 years. You
mhm,
know, it's like it's both very exciting. Everyone's scared, but it's like any new tool. I mean, you move from slide rules to, little calculators. That was a
yeah,
big deal.
yeah, I'm with you. So you think retirement is on your horizon, and what does that mean to you? Like not working? I'm sort of
um,
fascinated with that whole the idea of retirement because I don't It's hard. I see people struggle. I see people, mostly the breadwinners who move into retirement, have this really rough transition. But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
also see people who move through it, my mom, for example, beautifully and in a way of, like, being liberated, really.
What
So,
kind
what
of
is
work did she do?
teacher?
Uh, does she still, in a sense, teach though?
I
I
mean,
mean,
she does volunteer at these immigration centers around Atlanta, and in her neighborhood, she's called upon often for tutoring, and so it's a little bit here and there, but she,
right, right.
yeah. And she
So I
was a
think that's a part
caregiver.
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Her
Oh,
husband was a my
mm,
stepdad,
mm,
quadriplegic for a little over 20 years, and so that was also having external structure sort of
yeah,
dictate your time and energy
yes,
was a huge part of
yes,
her adult life, so, yeah.
yes.
Reclaiming that has been interesting, and
She on her own now?
yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very different, right? Um, Centering yourself around others like that. So, yeah. For, because we're both therapists, David and I, we we love our work. We don't have a set day when we would end, you
Mhm.
know. Um, I think we'll go down in the numbers of
Mhm.
people perhaps that we see. I also think that um, you know, it's the kind of work we can do for a very long time. And there is something about keeping my mind engaged that feels really important to me. So at this point, I know the end is coming. It's like, how many sitars or how many times do I re-register as CIOIT? Like I probably will do it one or two more times, and then it will have no meaning, you know.
Mhm.
And um and then the question is kind of like your mom, how do you put your skills, how do you continue doing work that you love, perhaps in a different way or in a different format to a different group? There's lots of sort of direction that we look at now. Where do we put our skills as needed?
Mhm.
you know so yeah.
Is there something you sort of are waiting for to do?
Good question. No, I think I've been more of in action around what I do, like, creating the trainings that you have to actually do something.
Yeah.
But I'm always willing to change it up. So I think I'm going in this direction. And if it's like, well, that didn't work, I'll switch. I'm
Mhm.
very flexible in that. So I kind of, as things open up, I go toward, I'm sort of like water flowing wherever it's easiest,
Mhm.
is sort of where I go. And I have a lot of different skills to pull from. So I'm like, ooh, who do I want to be here and
Mhm.
here? So I'm kind of in an opening time right now, mostly because I left Phoenix Rising a couple of years ago. So I'm still kind of playing with, like, I never thought about teaching my own stuff. That wasn't really where I thought I was going to go. And then I just missed teaching. And I thought, well, what can I teach? And I found a place and I started teaching. I'm like, oh, I could do it this way or this
Uh-huh.
way. And so I just flow and go, oh, well, that came through. I'll go that
Yeah.
direction.
Yeah. I
So,
get it. Not like a five-year plan kinda person.
yeah, yeah. But also, and I think that's more of what you do when you're younger. Like I'm watching my son go,
Mhm.
okay, I want to be really deliberate about my next step in his work
Mm.
and the work that he does. And I'm like, yeah, I remember that feeling,
Mhm. Like
like,
needing to
okay,
secure something or build upon. Yeah.
build upon, and deciding this is where I really want to go. So what are my steps to get there? I'm not really going anywhere at this point. I'm just like,
Mm.
how do I get to play with this?
Mm.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It kind of is, isn't it? Sounds
Mhm.
better sometimes than it feels.
I mean, I
Uh,
think I'm in the, I'm late to the build upon game, but I feel that pressure in a different way than I have. And I think my husband is sort of conceptualizing retirement for himself. And in my head, I think like I wouldn't, what would I do? Like, I don't have a sense of that. I'm not there yet. I'm still in the process of trying to build. Um, and excited by the having more focus around that. But I'm
yeah.
similar to you in that, something will pull and call at me. I've started making a new piece, and I think it will take up, the entire month of April because it's like most likely more installation style. And so it's easy for me to sort of veer away
Yeah.
from building and start creating
Yeah.
and build and doing that. So
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. But you don't feel that that too is moving you along your path?
it's all related. I definitely
Yeah.
feel the relationship and the nourishment that comes from being involved in those different projects in different ways for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I have to sort of get over the desire for it to be simple and clear.
Uh, yeah.
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 It's- yeah.
Ooh, go for messy.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
think that was
my
a
stepson
Phoenix
was like,
Rising instruction.
Yeah. My kids are like, "Wait, what do you do?" And I was like, "Well, which thing? What
Mhm.
what job are you referring to? I have several." Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I think, I listened to my son and how he's putting his life together, and he has two parents. He has his dad, who also was sort of entrepreneurial in what he did, and so Jake's very aware of, like, how do I be entrepreneurial? Like, I don't have to fit into the usual molds. So I think your kids get to see that too, that
Mhm.
there's lots of ways of doing your work and making choices out there. Um, there are times when I think, oh, I probably should have stayed in the computer field because I would have been so much wealthier,
I
and
know.
retirement would look very different, but I would have spent the past 25 years in high stress and hating what I did,
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Right. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So I don't have the money I would have had. We'll see
Mhm.
how that goes. I'll let you know in 20 years if that
Yeah,
was a
let me
good
know.
choice or not.
I mean, yeah, it's all up for grabs now. It feels like there's not really a sense of the same kind of trajectory or security in that way that there was.
No.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true too. So,
Yeah. Just on the topic of like work and career and trajectory and um I find it really difficult to let go of these ideals around financial stability or clarity of path
mhm,
that I've inherited
mhm,
because that feels so and I know the grass is greener because I hear from people who are on that other side who are looking at retirement are and they're also lamenting 20 years that they didn't sort of pursue something that was more of a heart desire. So I get it.
right.
And I also am trying to navigate my own growth edges around that. Like, well, so if you want stability and you want something a little more consistent, then why wouldn't you do that? And it's like, well, every time I move towards that, I kind of pull back away. Now, is that a deeper, soul path, or is that avoiding an
Fear.
edge of exactly? And would I be easier? Would life feel a little bit easier if I had that in place, or would it feel less? Would it feel more? It's those questions I'm always kind of like linger around when I bring up the topic of work, and then when I talk to someone who has a full career and a sort of a as maybe further down the line, I'm always wondering how how did you navigate that? Like, where
Yeah,
is this an edge to push into and grow from? And where is this like, what? This is how it is for me.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, one thing that you spoke of at the start is like, this is old stuff.
Mm,
Finances and the way you should be living life and money you need to, save and all those things are really old stuff because money isn't just money. Money is power or safety or stability and so when I coach people, um, you, and oftentimes it's not around how do I make money or where am I going or things like that. It's this old stuff that crops
mm,
up like, oh, I should be doing this, or my family's looking at me this way, or which means I'm looking at me this way. So we end up working with kind of, and I know I had to go through this too. Like if I have go through a slow period and I start going, oh my God, I'm not making the money I need to make. 20 years ago, when I first started this, totally freaked out.
mm,
I was like, I can't do this. I have to go back to corporate. I have to figure this out. Like my reaction was severe and strong and negative.
mm,
And then you do your work and you
mhm,
go, wow, okay, settle down. There are times you do fine, times you don't do fine. How are you going to be with not a steady paycheck?
mm,
And you have choice around that. So, yeah, so like, let's do our work.
mhm,
I don't respond in the same way. I can hear those words, like the neural pathway is still well wired with it, but I've done the work around enough times that I don't really feel it. And also, I'm very privileged. I
mm,
am
mhm,
privileged for us to have a home that does not cost a fortune in California. Simply because my husband had another house here and I had a house up in Seattle. We sold, could put it in, you know, to having a home here. Um, and uh, and so we live simply, but we live just fine. So when you have all the basics, that's a very different question.
oh, yeah,
And so we have the basics down. We're okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So my son is fine.
mhm,
He makes plenty of money. His dad is wealthy enough, so he'll be fine. So I don't have to worry about, I was single mom. That was a different place to be for a
mhm,
while, for many years. Yeah.
mhm,
Yeah. So, I tell people don't give up your day job if, if you can't meet those basics. And those basics are going to be different for different people
right.
too. So, yeah.
Yeah, where you feel settled and comfortable, it is extremely different. I mean, you see it in New York all the time, but there's even within my, I would say, friend group, you can see where people's baselines are. It's really different. It's pretty
Yes.
different, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We have a lot of friends that are retiring, and they're all traveling and going
Yeah.
here and to, joining wine clubs. I don't know, stuff like that. And I'm like, it's just not going to be in our, you know, we'll do our big trip every other year, not
Yeah.
every year,
Mhm. Yeah.
and if we can't go, over to Europe, then our big trip will be back to Seattle.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's a scary one though.
Mhm.
Takes time to unwind all that.
Mhm.
Are you better now? Do you feel like?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a different um I don't work for anyone now. So that's not true. I work for Rooted, but I feel I have so much agency within that organization that I feel
What is
like I'm
rooted?
more of a
I love
Rooted
that name.
Global Village. Yeah,
Hmm?
it's an online community. We don't say community, online gathering space where we bring in different speakers, thinkers, practitioners once a month, and then we have offerings throughout the month that are either related to that or not. So
Oh, that's really cool.
yeah, and it's based all over the world. So right now we're
Hmm.
in the third month of a 9-month play curriculum. You might be really into it actually. So, like, as I'm saying this now, I'm like,
Send me
"What?
the
She
link.
should." Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's actually
Uh-huh.
very cool, and because it's a more global perspective, it's not I would say it is probably heavily weighted in the US in terms of issues or, perspectives, but not always, and there's a lot of people from a lot of different places that are contributing in ways that are pretty interesting. We have things where people, from the community offer on Fridays. We have, like, a co-being working space where people come in and just log on together. There's an incredible one of my team members, Cliff Berrien, is a DJ, but he's also a I mean, what do you say? He's a drummer, but he's has this incredible wealth of world music that he offers once a month. It's like a dance party to world music. So there's like a
Oh,
lot of different ways to
wow.
engage, and it's based in
Mhm.
sort of questioning, upending, disrupting colonial and supremacist culture and systems in within the way that we organize and are together. So we're doing it
Mhm.
through alternate pathways through music, through play, through somatic practices. I offer my
Mm.
seam class once a month, so it's
What seem?
somatic experiencing with authentic movement. So I take the frame of SE and apply it to an authentic movement practice, and it's one of the few
Nice.
spaces where we get to be with each other in a non-verbal way, which is pretty fun. We
Yeah.
talk, but it's
Is
not the focus.
everything online?
It is, which is starting
Mhm.
to shift. There's starting to be more gatherings that are happening in location, which is something
Mhm.
I've been excited about and looking forward to
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wonder if there's
Because
sort of
it's so
a San
global, it's
Diego.
been tough. Yeah. We had
Mhm.
there was something we did have a tiny little gathering in LA, not I guess last year.
Mm.
So we're just kind of trying it out and seeing what we
Mhm.
can do more locally.
Mhm. Mhm. I will definitely check that out.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
great. Mhm.
Mm. Mhm.
It began Corrine Bell is the, lead on it. It was her sort of project, and she's in the completion right now of her I guess it's her PhD, and I can't even tell you what it's in. But it's like cultural, decolonial cultural work is what I would
Okay.
say.
Okay.
Yeah. She's gonna be like, "What? How do you not know my" Sorry, Corinne. I love you. I'm sorry, I can't remember. But it's been a big part of her work, and so Rooted has been part of that development too. So she's
Mhm.
moving back to Switzerland today. She's been in LA for 2 years
Oh.
and is
Oh,
moving
wow.
back today. Yeah. So
Wow.
yeah.
So how are these podcasts for you meaningful? Like what is there something you feel you're doing with these or
Hmm.
like I just listened to you talk with Leslie, I think the last
Yeah.
one or something and I was like, oh, so so but I
It's a
didn't
really
even
good yeah, no, it's a good
yeah.
question, and I've just completed a year of doing it, and
Mm-hmm.
it started
Mm,
really as an experiment, because I thought, "What if we got together in the similar way that we do with authentic movement?" Which was just improvisational, like, I don't have any agenda, I don't have questions, I didn't research you, I don't know, like, let's just show up to each other and see what shows up, what impulse arrives between 2 people when they're in conversation. So that was the
and
impetus.
don't you call it something like that,
Yeah,
impulse or
reverence
something?
for impulse. Yeah. And
I
so it was like,
probably should
let's
use
see.
that.
No, I'm glad that you were not like, looking into
Because
it
I
because
had the impulse just to say,
yes.
"Oh, that was fun."
I love that you did too because it
Oh.
it is a weird ask. And then I think I couldn't quite understand what it was yet, and that's how I learn is by doing. So it's more like an
Yeah,
experiment. And now that I'm ending a year of it, I'm
yeah.
realizing I feel more shape to it and I feel more intention around it. And so your
What
question is timely because I do want to
yeah,
spend a little bit of time mm, maybe shifting the experiment or the intention around it as opposed to just having sort of an open-ended let's see what happens. I
uh-huh,
do feel strongly like I want to do deeper research and work around impulse in particular. Um, but around, you know,
Well, what would that sound like right now?
well, I think we're doing it.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, you mean
Okay.
a different intention?
Yeah.
I think I would want to. It's a little. It's challenging. So one way I'm looking at it is like the how I've been making dances. The last performance I made, the challenge was to choreograph every single moment because I had become quite comfortable with improvisation. I was like, all right,
Yes.
I'm at
Yeah.
home here, whatever, man.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and it was like actually felt much edgier to have someone see the choices I decided were good ones and
Yes.
kept, and then
Yes.
own and commit and do it that way. And so that was like where I headed. So everything was and that's what I mean about needing to sort of flip where I'm growing. And so
Uh-huh.
similar here, I feel like what if I had actually more intention, more shape, more direction, had questions. My fear is
Mhm.
losing an openness to the moment, but that's not necessarily a product of having more structure.
Yeah, that's a bit of a belief system. Can you
Yeah.
be open within structure?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you do you listen to podcasts?
I do.
Which ones are
Uh-huh.
you drawn to? I was also the other experiment was like I don't know a lot of long form female podcasts. I know a lot of male led ones and I was sort of like where are the women doing long form?
Krista
So that was
Tippett.
the other.
Krista
Yeah.
Tippett doing On
Yeah.
Being. Um, I also like some of the comedy ones.
Mhm.
Hold on,
Julia
I have to
Louise
look up.
Dreyfus. Have you listened to
Yeah,
it? Yeah. Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah. So that was a good one. Let's see, this is where my brain isn't good. So, um, because I just had some new ones that seemed really interesting. Um, and I can't remember what they were. I like things like The Moth.
Mhm.
Um, uh, someone does, oh, Amy Wheeler does the yoga therapy hour.
Oh.
Have you listened to hers?
Now I'll be curious to listen.
Yeah, and then I like a lot of the NPR stuff, Hidden Brain and Invisibility.
Mhm.
Um, also, if you haven't looked at Aspen Ideas,
Oh,
do you
I
know
don't
the
know.
Aspen? So a lot of stuff comes out of the Aspen. Look for Aspen Ideas. Oh, it's called Aspen Ideas to Go. Um, but they have a community out of Aspen where they bring a lot of the big people to
Mhm.
talk, and they just had a big conference with topics, and it's like the Obamas and you know
Mm.
um, that kind of stuff. And it's just a really interesting space
Mm.
of ideas, Aspen
Mhm.
ideas.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's kind of
Mhm. Do you
interesting.
use them for I mean, I guess I use them for many different things, but is there like is there a reason you go to listen to podcasts? Is it soothing or is it stimulation or is it entertainment or all of the above?
Kind of all of it, depending on what I need. I do some like long drives to see my mom,
Mhm.
so that's like 3 hours, and I get
Mhm.
through a bunch of podcasts, and I'm
Mhm.
always really happy to have that kind of time
Mhm.
to listen to them. Um, and because I know a lot of people will drive and listen to books, and I
Mhm.
get too distracted I'm like, okay, am I listening or am I driving here? So that's just a little hard for my brain. Um, and yeah, I like ideas. Oh, I know. Patrick O'Toole, I think is his name, out of On Being, does these Poetry Unbound,
My mother
which is
loves that.
oh
Oh,
my
she just
God,
loves it. Yeah,
so good,
so
so
good.
beautiful.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so Yeah, all of that entertained,
Mm-hmm.
information.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Um,
it's been this whole year has been an interesting, it's also been a little bit of like a loop back to teachers and people I haven't seen or talked to in so long that I am curious about and have really had an impact on me, like you, and in ways that
mm.
I've wanted to be like, where are they? And like,
Where
what
are we
is,
all?
yeah, yeah. I
Uh,
felt that, in COVID when it first happened, there was a sort of like, is everyone okay? And who are all the people I think of and know?
yeah,
Um, but I've kept that feeling a little bit and curiosity about just how people are doing their lives and where they are and
nice
what's
way
moving
to
them.
connect,
Hmm.
huh?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, I do hold questions around like, is it? And this is funny because now that I'm saying it, I realize the mirroring of dance. But is it who's it for? Is sort of the question. And sometimes in authentic movement, there have been times where it's been so amazing and magical that you think this is worth being a performance. Like this is incredible. And other
yeah,
times you're like, it just is what it is. And I've come to a clearer understanding that I don't want to perform authentic movement. Like I'm not interested in that actually.
yeah,
And so I'm wondering similarly if I'm reaching a threshold here where I've grown comfortable with this process being witnessed. And now
yeah,
what if I shaped it more or
yeah, yeah. So good. So you get to end here and go kind of integrate what all this year has been for
mhm.
you with all the people who have come in. Let me know
Mhm.
how it lands.
That's a great idea. So you just dropped something that I think I'm like, "Oh, that would be so interesting to actually do is do that review like what has this been and what's changing and what's staying." And
Uh, And
yeah.
then what's your steps? That's
Yeah.
you move that out. Ta-da!
Yay, we just had a session.
Integration. We just had a session. I was going
Yay.
to add one thing to the podcast idea.
Yeah.
Um, One thing that David and I do together is listen to podcasts, and then we'll stop it when one of us is like, okay, wait, that didn't make sense, or
Mhm.
what about this, or whatever. So it's actually for us a way for us to um, they have this term called sapiosexuals, and like David and I get totally turned on when our intellect is turned on, and we
Ah,
can do
yeah.
that with podcasts.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah, that resonates quite a bit. We do a lot of
okay.
driving, like 18, 19-hour drives
Oh,
often. Yeah,
oh,
with the kids and everything. And so one of the things we end up doing is really long podcasts. And we do a similar thing where we stop and then we have debates. I don't know that it
yes.
brings like deep debates. Like, I actually don't agree with that, and it'll go on and on and on. Yeah.
It's the best.
Yeah. It's
So
great.
yeah, yeah. So I'll hand that to you in case you want a
Hmm,
podcast that creates debates.
interesting.
Not.
I like that.
Yeah.
Or partnered. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like David, who's a couples therapist, we watch couples therapy, and which is
Do you listen to Esther Perel's podcast?
we have, but not as much together, but we do watch the couples therapy, and he's like, oh God, no. And we just stop it, and
Ah,
he's like, oh, that's so wrong.
that's a show,
So
right?
it is a show, and I
Okay.
actually learned quite a bit about how he does. He sends people to me, and because he knows there's a limit to the amount of work he does psychodynamically, he's very good with that. But sometimes people need more. They need more
Mhm,
touch. They need
mhm.
more in the body. But the couple stuff, I'm like, wow, you do it that way. Here's how I do it. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
we have a little.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Thank you so much for listening to this conversation between Soleil and I. She has some incredible trainings coming up, a 4-week training in the fall for yoga therapists and therapists who love yoga, and a 6-month training in early 2025 with a focus for mental health therapists and coaches. You can learn all about her work and registration at soleilhepner.com. And just so you know, this was the last podcast for my first season. So much learning. And there will be a bonus pod before the next season starts. And it's going to be my husband interviewing me. Okay, scary. About what this podcasting experiment has yielded and what is shifting and why. So stay tuned. And as always, your feedback is truly welcome.